What if the place where children laughed by the lake was never meant for play? What if the laughter was only a mask, and underneath it, something else was listening? And what if that something still answers 50 years later? On the map of Colorado, it was just another summer camp, Camp Halcyon. Pine forest, mountain air, lake reflections. The brochure said it was a youth health program in partnership with the University of Boulder. Parents were told their kids would hike, swim, and study astronomy. But no photographs from that summer were ever developed. According to federal records, the camp opened in June 1969 and shut down by September. The official reason? Unstable geological conditions. Unofficially, it was the birthplace of a classified research program under the U.S. Department of Defense DARPA/Human Resonance Initiative. Lead scientist, Dr. Lydia Kells. Kells was a neuropsychologist working on sensory synchronization in children. Her project carried the code name EchoGate, an experiment in collective acoustic response, designed to test whether sound could unify perception between multiple minds. When she arrived at Camp Halcyon that summer, she brought 3 assistants, 6 crates of recording gear, and a sealed metal dome packed with sensors. Locals believed it was a new water tank. It wasn't. The dome was installed beneath the administrative building, sublevel B. The camp roster listed 147 children, but the medical files later showed 148. One name didn't belong. Roe Ethan arrived early. Do not assign to group. No signature. No stamp. Just a note in pencil. Life in the camp was highly regulated. Children woke to short tones from hidden speakers, not music. Breakfast followed silence. During exercises, they marched perfectly in sync, as if keeping time to an invisible metronome. At night, a deep hum rose from beneath the ground. Steady, mechanical, almost like breathing. Everyone on staff had signed a federal non-disclosure form. Those who refused didn't return the next season. One technician, George Halper, later sent an unsigned letter to the Denver Post. It's not a camp, it's a station. The children are trained to listen, not with their ears, but with something deeper. And sometimes, they listen back. The letter was never printed. Eyewitness notes from an inspection report mention. Children respond to sound cues without instruction. Their motion is synchronized. No verbal coordination observed. Dr. Kells documented everything. In her recovered field diary dated July 11, 1969, she wrote, "Subjects adapt to rhythmic exposure faster than projected. Self-synchronization achieved after 4-5 minutes. Unresponsive to verbal names. One subject, Ethan Rowe, demonstrates extended fixation to tone sequence. Claims to see sound in spatial form." That same week, a night guard reported strange light below the admin wing. A pulse that lasted no more than 2 seconds, followed by total silence. The next morning, Dr. Kells filed a 1-line update in her logbook. Sublevel active. Phase 0 complete. Begin observation. From that day forward, the laughter in Camp Halcyon stopped. But the hum beneath the ground never did. By late July, the staff at Camp Halcyon had stopped questioning orders. Every day felt identical: meals, drills, silence. Yet, among the groups of campers, there were always a few faces missing from roll call. They never joined morning lineups, never appeared in photos, and yet, trays for them were set at dinner. No one dared ask who those children were. Dr. Lydia Kells called them the control subjects. They wore plain gray uniforms instead of the camp's blue ones. They didn't talk, didn't laugh, and didn't blink when others passed by. Some of the counselors believed they were mute. Others whispered that they were not from the same batch as the rest. One night, during a training session in the recreation hall, An instructor played a rhythmic tone through an old metronome amplifier. The sound was soft, mechanical, steady. Halfway through the exercise, a boy named Caleb Ward froze mid-step and began swaying in perfect rhythm. Then, one by one, 3 other children followed him, moving in unison, repeating the instructor's words exactly, down to the breath. When the sound stopped, they didn't. Their lips kept moving, their eyes open and vacant, voices merging into one continuous echo that filled the room long after the last click of the metronome. The instructor panicked and cut the power, plunging the hall into darkness. Still, the whispering continued. Technician George Halper, who had been monitoring the test, described it later in his log. Echo persisted for 24 seconds after signal ceased. Source unidentified. Room temperature dropped by 4 degrees. One child began bleeding from the nose, no external trauma. The next morning, the entire group was gone. Their bunks stripped, name tags removed. In the camp's official report, a single handwritten note replaced their files. Group D dissolved. Equipment damaged due to acoustic feedback. That evening, Halper was ordered to inspect the recreation hall. The wooden floor bore deep circular marks, as if something heavy had pressed into it from below. The sound system was warped. Speaker cones folded inward, like lungs collapsing. Dr. Kells didn't appear disturbed. In fact, her field notes from that date read almost calmly. Subjects P2 through P5 exhibited complete resonance lock. Behavior aligned to nonverbal cues. Loss of identity markers confirmed. Recommend isolation protocol. When asked what resonance lock meant, she simply replied, "It's when the brain stops hearing and starts remembering." After the incident, Halper requested reassignment. His letter was never answered. He disappeared from the camp registry 3 days later. From that week on, night guards began reporting faint sounds under the ground. Not machines, not generators, but voices, whispering in overlapping rhythm. They weren't words anyone could understand. But if you stood close enough to the earth and listened long enough, started to sound like counting. The first man to see the sublevel was not a scientist. His name was Mark Savers, an electrical technician from Denver, sent to inspect the power irregularities under Camp Halcyon. He arrived on August 3, 1969, 3 weeks before the camp was shut down. The report said the issue came from a faulty transformer, but Savers noticed something stranger. The readings on his voltmeter kept doubling whenever he approached the southern wing, as if the ground itself was conducting energy. At 2:15 p.m., he followed a service tunnel behind the kitchen, descending a narrow concrete shaft that should have ended in a storage bay. Instead, it opened into a wide metallic corridor, perfectly round, lined with panels that shimmered faintly in the dark. There were no labels, no switches, no wiring. Only a low resonance, like the echo of his own heartbeat, slightly delayed. He walked forward. Every footstep returned twice, once in sound, and once in something deeper, a pulse that made his chest vibrate. In his logbook, later recovered from his locker, he wrote, "The room has no corners. Light exists but no source. There is an object in the center metal cylinder, transparent on one side. Inside, a chair, wires, helmet. When I touched the surface, I felt a shock. Mild, but inside the skull, not through the hand." He lost consciousness for several minutes. When he came to, his wristwatch read 3:07 p.m. But the security post above recorded his return at 3:29. 16 minutes missing. Back at the main building, Dr. Lydia Kells questioned him personally. Witnesses said she didn't take notes. She just listened, eyes unfocused, as if remembering something herself. Then she told him, "You were never there, Mr. Savers." That evening, his belongings were packed and shipped home. The next day, a replacement technician arrived, using the same ID badge. 2 weeks later, during a routine cleanup, the camp custodian found Saver's notebook hidden behind a fuse box. It was damp, the writing smudged, but one phrase stood out, underlined twice. Sound doesn't stop here. It circles back. When federal agents arrived to confiscate the notebook, they also sealed the access tunnel. Concrete was poured over the hatch within hours. Officially, the space beneath the camp didn't exist. Unofficially, it received a name used only in restricted memoranda, Echo Gate Sector B. After that, the humming under Camp Halcyon grew louder. People said it could be heard even through the lake water. And sometimes, if the night was completely still, you could hear it answering back. Ethan Rowe arrived without a smile, without a suitcase, and without a sound. He stood in the doorway of the infirmary, pale and barefoot, staring past everyone as if he already knew the layout of the building. Dr. Lydia Kells was told he had special clearance. No medical history, no parent contact, no photographs. Just a sealed envelope marked P subject. Cognitive pattern atypical. She tried speaking to him the way she spoke to other children, soft, patient, careful. He never looked at her face, only at the ceiling, tracing invisible lines with his finger. When she finally asked what he was doing, he answered quietly, "Following the cables. They don't go where you think." The next morning, Lydia found him alone in the rec hall, drawing on the floor with white chalk. He wasn't doodling. He was drafting. The lines curved and intersected with mechanical precision. Tunnels, chambers, stairwells. The pattern matched the old construction blueprints of the camp, except for one thing. Ethan's map extended far beyond the known boundaries, showing corridors that connected to the sealed sublevel B. When she asked who showed him those tunnels, he said, "Nobody. They hum. You can hear the shape." That night, Lydia brought Ethan into the small testing room for a basic resonance study. She played a sequence of tones from 100 to 900 hertz, randomized and brief. Ethan closed his eyes and repeated them, in perfect reverse order, each one exact to the frequency. No hesitation, no error. The lab assistant thought it was a trick. Lydia knew better. She noted in her field log, "Subject perceives temporal directionality of sound. Suggests nonlinear processing. Possible bilateral synchronization of auditory cortex." When the session ended, Ethan refused to leave. He sat by the wall, staring at the dim red standby light on the control panel. Then he whispered, "Please don't turn the light on when I sleep. It ruins the patterns." "The patterns?" she asked. "Yes. When it's dark, I can see the sound. It folds around the room. The lamps cut it." That night, she dreamed of lines, hundreds of them, connecting like nerves beneath the earth. 2 days later, at 2:47 a.m., Lydia woke to a faint noise outside her cabin. She stepped into the hallway and saw Ethan standing barefoot on the gravel path, facing the dark forest. He was counting under his breath, every step deliberate. 31, 32, 33. When she touched his shoulder, he didn't startle. He turned his head slightly and said, in a flat, dreamlike tone, "They're asleep now, but they're listening." The next morning, she checked the sound monitors installed around the camp. All 8 recorders showed interference between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Identical pulse frequencies, perfectly synchronized, like something underground had been counting with him. In her diary, she wrote only one sentence: "Ethan doesn't follow echoes. The echoes follow him." On August 10th, a black government car climbed the mountain road to Camp Halcyon. It didn't stop at the gate, it went straight through. The guards didn't even raise a hand. From the back seat stepped a tall man in a dark coat, leaning on a bone-handled cane. His name, according to the documents, was Dr. Nathan Sharp, senior representative of the National Acoustic Perception Program. He walked with a limp and spoke as if every word weighed more than it should. Short, fractured sentences, pieces of thought left hanging in the air. During his first meeting with Lydia Kells, he simply said, "If he starts the rewrite, record every breath." Lydia had no idea who he was supposed to be. She didn't ask. Dr. Sharp inspected the facility with slow precision. He never raised his voice, never looked surprised. Yet everyone felt that, from that day on, the camp no longer belonged to science, it belonged to him. He ordered all radio frequencies to be sealed, all correspondence redirected to a Washington address with no return code. When Lydia protested that the experiments were designed for cognitive therapy, not military application, he replied, "Therapy, war, same direction, different amplitude." That night, Sharp entered the laboratory where Ethan Rowe was being monitored. He didn't introduce himself. He simply stood behind the glass wall, watching the boy sketching on the table surface with chalk fragments. Ethan was drawing again, the same circular symbol, two curved lines crossing at the center, perfectly symmetrical. Sharp's eyes narrowed. He tapped the glass once with his cane and said, almost reverently, "Reverse entry. He remembers it." Lydia looked up from her notes. "What does that mean?" He turned toward her, half smiling. "It's not what it means, Doctor. It's what it opens." From that day forward, the entire tone of the project shifted. New cables appeared under the floor, thicker and unmarked. A dozen soldiers in civilian clothing began guarding the sublevel entrance. Lydia's team was told to conduct harmonic induction sessions twice daily, each lasting exactly 27 minutes. No one explained why. Ethan grew restless. He stopped sleeping, spent hours staring at the reflection of the oscilloscopes. When Lydia asked what he was thinking about, he said, "They're not reflections. They're eyes. The place is awake." In her private notes, she wrote, "Sharp's orders contradict protocol. He refers to Ethan as a resonance operator. Purpose unclear. I suspect the research has moved beyond sensory mapping toward spatial manipulation through sustained acoustic feedback." The next evening, she found Ethan sitting on the floor of his room, tracing the same intersecting arcs over and over again, whispering between strokes. Almost closed, almost whole. The chalk dust shimmered faintly in the low red light. When Sharp saw it, he grabbed Lydia's wrist, hard enough to leave marks. His voice was low, urgent, almost trembling. "If he finishes the circle, something wakes up." Lydia didn't ask what that something was. But deep down, she already knew. It had been humming beneath them all along. It happened on a windless night, August 17th, 1969. The mountain air was still, the lake mirror smooth, and every generator inside Camp Halcyon hummed at the same perfect frequency. 62 Hz. At 2:04 a.m. The security monitors in the isolation wing froze. The camera watching Ethan Rowe's room displayed only static. For 13 minutes, every channel flickered with the same gray shimmer, pulsing faintly in rhythm, like a heartbeat under glass. When the feed returned, the room was empty. The door was locked from the inside. Lydia Kells was the first to reach the corridor. The steel handle burned her hand. The metal was hot, as if electricity had passed through it. Inside, Ethan's bed was untouched, sheets perfectly smooth. The chalk circle he had drawn the day before was gone, erased completely. Only a faint pattern of intersecting arcs glimmered on the concrete, visible under ultraviolet light. They searched for hours. Sharp ordered a perimeter sweep, then radio silence. At 4:56 a.m., a guard near the reservoir shouted that he'd found something. Ethan was sitting at the water's edge, barefoot, his arms submerged up to the elbows. He didn't move when they approached. His lips moved slowly, repeating the same phrase again and again. There are 9, but one thinks like 3. 9, but one thinks like 3. When Lydia knelt beside him, his pupils were wide, reflecting the moonlight. The water around his hands vibrated softly, tiny ripples radiating outward in perfect symmetry. She whispered his name. He looked at her, not with fear, but with calm recognition, and said, "It's open now." Then he went still. The medical team carried him to the infirmary. Pulse weak, temperature abnormally low, 33 degrees Celsius. EG showed rhythmic spikes identical to the sublevel's acoustic output. For 7 minutes, his brain and the camp's machinery were in tune. When Lydia demanded the experiment be shut down, Sharp's expression didn't change. "You don't stop revelation because it bleeds," he said. "Broken doesn't mean destroyed. We're closer to truth than ever." She shouted that it wasn't truth, it was interference, corruption. He simply replied, "Then let it finish rewriting." By morning, Ethan was gone. His bed stripped, his file removed from the archives, every recording of him magnetically wiped. The only trace left was a burned imprint on the infirmary wall. A perfect circle 1 meter wide, faintly luminescent in darkness. Lydia's final note for that day read, "Subject missing. No forced entry. Environmental resonance continues. The hum is louder now. It knows his name." And from that night on, no one at Camp Halcyon ever spoke Ethan Rowe's name aloud again. Because somewhere beneath the reservoir, under layers of stone and water, the hum began to echo back, as if answering. The blackout lasted exactly 47 seconds. Not a surge, not a storm, just the sound of every light in Camp Halcyon dying at once. The power monitors later showed nothing abnormal. No blown fuses, no tripped relays. But every witness remembered the same thing. During those 47 seconds, the air itself vibrated, slow, heavy, like something breathing through the earth. When the lights returned, the camp was chaos. Children had woken screaming from their beds. Several were found standing in the halls, eyes open, muttering the same fragmented words. White hallway, alcohol smell. A woman's voice without a face. Lydia tried to calm them, but even she felt it. That pressure behind the eyes, the sense of being watched from inside the walls. One boy clutched her sleeve and whispered, "The rooms moved while we slept." Later that night, when the camp finally fell silent again, Lydia descended into the sealed sublevel alone. The air was colder there, heavy with moisture and rust. She turned on her field recorder and stepped through the narrow passage. The sound changed with every step. First a hum, then a pulse, then something almost human. It wasn't mechanical at all. It was breathing, slow, steady, as if something alive was drawing air through water. Lydia crouched near the center platform, the same one Savers had described months earlier, and placed her microphone against the metal surface. The vibration traveled through the device, through her hand, through her ribs. For 20 seconds, the pattern was stable. Then a higher frequency emerged. Faint, melodic, impossible. When she played the tape back later, her equipment registered an irregular waveform. On the spectrogram, the pulse formed the clear outline of a human heart. Dr. Sharp reviewed the data with an expression that almost looked like satisfaction. "Residual imprint," he said. "The place remembers what happens to it. Sound can store emotion. Trauma leaves frequency." Lydia argued that it was interference, a mechanical echo distorted by magnetism. Sharp only smiled. Not interference, he said. Inheritance. That same night, unable to sleep, Lydia sat alone in her cabin replaying the tape through headphones. Between the low pulses, a faint whisper began to rise. Too quiet to register at first, then clearer, female, almost tender. Don't touch the key. She froze. The phrase repeated, slower now, as though the voice was moving closer. Don't touch the key. Lydia ripped off the headphones and backed away from the recorder. The reels kept spinning even though the machine was unplugged. On the meter, the signal glowed bright red, identical to the frequency Ethan's brain had shown before he vanished. In her journal, she wrote, I don't know what the key is, but I think he left it open. By morning, the entire camp could hear it. A faint hum rising through the floors, steady, pulsing, patient. Children began covering their ears when they slept. Some said the hum was whispering their names. And Lydia, for the first time, began to believe it. 2 days after the blackout, Lydia Kell's tape was sent to Washington for review. The envelope bore no official seal, only a handwritten code, E11/Resonance Archive. The playback took place inside a secure acoustic chamber at Fort Detrick. Present were 4 people: Dr. Sharp, a sound engineer named Corinne, a stenographer, Helen Cole, and a neurologist from Chicago whose name was later redacted. At 9 a.m., the tape began to roll. For the first 40 seconds, there was only low static, like the distant rush of air in a mine. Then, a child's voice, quiet, monotone, without emotion. We went down. The light was inside the walls. She was waiting. One stepped in, and he was gone. The voice continued, describing shapes, corridors, the hum beneath the floor. The sound engineer noted rhythmic pulses aligning with the human heartbeat, exactly 62 beats per minute. Within minutes, all 4 listeners' heart monitors synchronized to the same tempo. Helen, the stenographer, began writing faster, then slower, then stopped entirely. She lifted her head and whispered, perfectly matching the tape, I am number 3. Her pupils dilated. She started mouthing words the tape hadn't yet reached. The doctor shouted to stop the playback. Corinne hit the switch, but the reels kept turning. When power was finally cut, the sound did not stop immediately. It faded like breath leaving a room. The recording was sealed in a lead-lined container and classified under Directive 42C. The official report described the event as auditory entrainment leading to mass suggestion. But the cameras in the chamber showed something else. For the final 6 seconds of the playback, a faint light flickered across the floor. A moving ring, perfectly circular. 2 days later, Helen Cole disappeared from her apartment. Her diary was found open on the kitchen table. The last sentence read, "The book has opened. I can hear the sign." In late August 1969, a direct order arrived from Washington. Initiate playback of tape 12. No explanation. No signatures, only the Pentagon seal stamped in black ink. Inside the sealed observation chamber were 5 people: Dr. Nathan Sharp, audio engineer Michael Zellman, neurologist Dr. Hawthorne, communications officer Frank Chu, and physicist Alan Poe. The tape was marked simply 12/entry. At 8 p.m. they began the test. For the first minute, there was only low, oscillating tone, deeper than any previous recording. Then a voice emerged, calm and human, but without breath or inflection. You are listening to the beginning. Your names are canceled. 1 listens. 2 records. 3 counts. 4 remains silent. The line repeated, slower each time. The light in the room began to dim, though the power readings remained stable. The air grew heavy, vibrating at the same pulse frequency detected in all prior incidents. Zellman reached for the stop button, but the reels kept spinning. Then the ceiling vibrated. Dust fell from the steel beams. The recording console began to hum on its own, producing frequencies not contained on the tape. Dr. Poe shouted that the walls were moving. Surveillance footage later confirmed visible distortion in the concrete. A dark circular shape spreading outward like oil in water. Sharp whispered, almost to himself, "It's not playback. It's transmission." The circle on the far wall deepened, pure black, absorbing light. One of the scientists, Frank Chu, stepped forward as if hypnotized. When he reached out and touched it, the sound exploded, not from the speakers, but from within each person present. Every witness later described it differently. A mother's voice, a siren, a heartbeat, a scream, all layered into one impossible note. Then silence. The power grid across a 3-mile radius went dead. When electricity returned 2 hours later, the chamber was empty. No trace of Dr. Nathan Sharp, only the impression of 2 hands pressed into the steel table and, on the concrete floor, a white circle perfectly smooth, fused into the stone. The official log ended with a single line, typed and later censored. Transmission successful. Entry achieved. Colorado, 2009. At 3:17 a.m. A seismograph station near Estes Park registered a low-frequency vibration repeating every 28 hours. The source could not be traced. It wasn't tectonic nor meteorological. The wave came from shallow ground, from somewhere under the abandoned site once known as Camp Halcyon. For most people, the name meant nothing. The camp had been erased from public maps decades ago. But for investigative journalist Aaron Hale, it was a lead, a rumor that had appeared in a declassified DARPA memo simply titled Project Echogate. Phase records missing. He arrived in mid-October, carrying a flashlight, a recorder, and a folder of grainy satellite images. The forest had reclaimed nearly everything. The cabins collapsed, the pier half buried in silt. Only the administration building still stood, crooked against the slope, its windows sealed by decades of dust. Inside, the air smelled of copper and mold. On the floor, half hidden beneath debris, Hale found a metal drawer rusted shut. He pried it open and pulled out a thick file. Gray cover, no logo, only one phrase stamped across it. Project Echogate. Inside were yellowed reports, diagrams of sound waves shaped like spirals, and several still photographs of children wired to electrodes. Most of the text was blacked out. At the bottom of the stack lay a single sheet of notebook paper. Small, torn, written in uneven, childlike handwriting. "I am number 3. The book is open. The return is agreed. Wait for the signal." Hale's recorder clicked on automatically. He hadn't touched it. The meter began to flicker, a rhythmic pulse exactly 62 beats per minute. Then came the sound. A low, breathing hum, distant yet close, like wind through wet stone. It was the same frequency pattern mentioned in the 1969 files. He lifted the recorder, whispering into the mic. "If anyone finds this, the signal's active. It's real." The hum deepened. The walls began to tremble slightly. Dust sifted from the ceiling, forming circles on the floor. Pale rings, faintly glowing in the beam of his flashlight. The recorder emitted a burst of static, followed by a single phrase, distorted but unmistakably human. "Welcome back, number 3. The light flickered once, then died. Only the sound remained, a rising tone, growing louder, until it filled the air with impossible clarity. And then silence. The footage recovered from Aaron Hale's camera ends there. Final frame. The empty room, the open folder, the sheet of paper pressed flat against the floor by an unseen hand. Black screen. White text fades in. Classified, access revoked. Then one last sound, so faint it almost isn't there. A slow, steady heartbeat. 62 beats per minute.